All right, Victoria, we're going to wait just a moment or two for people to file into the virtual theater.
No problem. No
Sure,
problem. And if I do go out, like I said, just hold tight and I will come back in.
Oh, Benjamin, hello. Benjamin's watching from Germany. All right. Okay, so it is working on Facebook. Yay.
Okay.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. Many of the guests that have been on Hollywood Kitchen, I knew before starting this project, either socially or they were friends here in Los Angeles. But I'm so excited. I met a new person who's really fabulous through doing Hollywood Kitchen. And it's really, really cool to connect with her. And I'm so excited to have her here today. Ladies and gentlemen, author, PhD, and author and biographer of Olivia De Havilland, Lady Triumphant. I'm so happy to welcome Victoria Amador.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's been so great getting to talk to you this week. It's wonderful. And you look fabulous.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You look great.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you about her because I love Olivia so much. You do, a lot of people do. So it's just a joy to get to talk about her today.
I think it's wonderful that you are interested in her too. It's great when you meet people that share your fangirlness about a person or about a place. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely. So the question I usually ask to most of my guests to kick off the show is how you first encountered this star and sort of what made you fall under their spell.
I always wanted to be an actress, so I actually pursued that for a while. So I watched a lot of old cinema, of course. I was growing up in rural Wisconsin, so that was what you did. You read books and you watched old TV. And I saw her in a lot of Errol Flynn films, and I thought she was lovely. But then Gone with the Wind was re-released in 1969, and I got to see that for the first time on the big screen. And I had read the book because, I mean, at that time, this is in the 60s, late 60s, you kind of did that. Plus my mother, Southern Belle, stories I could tell. So that was sort of a thing, And so from watching the film and knowing about her, I started to research her and I discovered she lived in Paris. So I got her address from who's who from the local Carnegie Library in New London, Wisconsin. And I wrote her a fan letter and she wrote back. And honest to God, I mean,
I might not have survived that.
you know what that is, right? I can't even to this day. It was one of the high points of my life. So she sent me a little photograph as well. And I didn't want her to think, oh, I just wrote to her so I could get a photo. So I wrote back and I said, here are my interests. Like acting, the Green Bay Packers, the Brontes. And I wanted to know if she would like to continue writing, and she did. And we stayed in touch right up to her death last year. So I feel really, really lucky because, to meet your heroine and to find out that she's just as cool as you hoped she'd be. How neat is that?
Doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, look what you do. Look what you do. I love that you give those tours at Hollywood Forever. It must just, that would never get old.
It doesn't, people ask that because I've been doing that now over 19 years. And I'm like, I have so much love and so much passion still. It just doesn't end. I first saw Olivia De Havilland, like yourself. My godmother was a Southern Belle. And Gone with the Wind was something we just watched a lot. Like I saw that many, many, many times growing up. Yeah. And one thing that struck me about Olivia De Havilland in that movie is that she was not a weak person. I mean, she wasn't mean and manipulative like Scarlett was. She was every bit as much as of a survivor as Scarlett and tough as Scarlett.
Oh,
But
yeah.
she was kind and gentle as a human being. Do you know what I mean? And that really stayed with me. And I loved that. And my godmother was very special to me. I used to hang out with her after school sometimes and watch old movies with her. And in 2008, when it was Olivia's, I think, 90th birthday, the LACMA Theater, which has sadly been demolished, but anyway, I digress. They showed The Heiress, and they flew Olivia in and showed The Heiress. And
Oh,
when she
God.
walked in the room, it's one of those moments where every hair on your body stands up, your eyes just well with tears, because getting to see this actress that you'd seen since you were a little kid in the flesh. But it was like a mob scene around her, and I thought, I have zero chance of getting like close to her, just none. But after the movie was over and the Q&A was over, I went out into the parking lot in tears, and I called my godmother who shown me her movies, and I had to tell her all about it, and she was so excited. So it was fun to kind of share that moment with her.
Oh, God, Carrie, I think one of the things I can say without doubt, I don't think Olivia ever took the respect of her fan base for granted. I think she was always delighted that people had that response to her. I think in that respect, though I wouldn't compare her to St. Joan Crawford, both of them understood what it meant to be a star, what it meant to be a professional actress, a Hollywood legend, and they lived up to it. But the thing that I loved so much about Olivia, and I never would call her that in real life, it was always Miss D or Miss De Havilland or Dame Olivia. And the thing that I loved about her, one of the many things, was that I think she knew how hard she had fought to get the sort of life she wanted. And I think that kept her real. I think that kept her a very level, very kind person. I think she was, she was tough as nails, man, but boy, I think she was Melanie. I just think that was her role model. And I think she lived up to that, certainly with people like us,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to start making in a minute here her salade niçoise. I hope I pronounced that
Wonderful.
correctly.
Yes,
Okay.
you did.
And this recipe comes from a cookbook, and I was informed about the recipe from Silver Screen Suckers, who is an excellent blogger in the UK and does celebrity recipes. And so tell me about what it was like to eat with Olivia, which you have done, drink with
Yes.
Olivia, which you have done. So amazing.
I know it's a miracle. I mean, I was so persistent. I'm so lucky she didn't have me arrested, because I mean, God, you live out there. It's such a fine line between really respecting somebody and appreciating their art, and then just kind of, going to that next level. No, really, I'm fine. So when I finally met her, it was in August 2012, and we'd been writing since 1969. And I was supposed to meet her 3 weeks before. So I showed up at her door, at her house in the 16th arrondissement in Paris. It's a tall, kind of like a shotgun house. If you've been to New Orleans, you know how those tall, thin houses are, and they go back, and then there's always a garden or a courtyard. That's what her place was like. It's wonderful. But she was ill. I hadn't gotten the message. So 3 weeks later, I emailed her, and she said, hey, are you free in a couple of days? Yes. So I flew from Edinburgh there, and that was the first time we met. We just had coffee and macaron, but we talked for 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And how generous. She came bounding down the stairs at the age of 97. I know. I mean, in a white silk blouse and a black pencil skirt, and her pearls. Pearls were a signature piece, as you know. And she said, there you are at last. Oh my God, it doesn't get better. So after that, we met 4 more times over the next 5 years. At her house, then she moved to a suite of rooms in a beautiful chalet hotel. It was always, she put me at ease every single time. And champagne helped. I'm you're cooking, I'm drinking. Uh, that's how Olivia would want it, I think. She was welcoming. We always had hors d'oeuvre. The glass was never empty. Her discreet assistants, who were always these lovely young postgraduate women living in Paris, they'd come in, we could talk about academics, all of this sort of stuff. And as the evening went on, she never lost her charm, her chic. I managed to hold it together until the door closed. And then I was out of my mind every time I was bombed. But in a tasteful way. And we had fun. It was fun. We laughed. We shared personal exchanges. And the hors d'oeuvre were always perfect. They were small. They were about
Like bite size.
bite size. It would be like a salmon mousse with a sprig of dill or any number of whipped beautiful things. And just enough so that you could have some food in your stomach. I mean, I remember the second time we met, between the two of us, we drank 3 bottles of champagne, and she was marvelous. Yeah. And she was 98. And I was,
Man.
yeah, but it never got, it was always fun. I would never presume intimacy, but we had friends in common. So with time, I don't know, we became friendly, and she was very good to me.
Well, she
And
lived to be 104, so she must have eaten really well and taken really good care of herself because
she did yoga, I think, into her 70s. She was very healthy, vigorous, but her parents were vigorous. Her sister lived to 96. I mean, a long-lived family. So she was just great. She was fun. I miss her. I miss her very much.
well, let's make her salad. Let's
Okay.
Okay, so salade niçoise. Okay, it serves for the recipe, which I will post on the hollywoodkitchenshow.com blog. But I'm going to make it for one, so I am scaling down my version of a little bit. So for the salad dressing, we have fresh lemon juice or wine vinegar. I have lemon juice. We've got olive oil, salt and pepper. Shoot, I forgot to get that, and I can't get up from where I'm at now, but that's okay. And then a little bit of Dijon mustard. So I'm gonna mix these things together here so we can make our salad dressing.
Do you know, I've made that dressing before as well. A friend of mine who is Turkish, and there's French influence in Turkish cooking and all of that sort of thing. And I love that. That's a fantastic salad dressing.
Okay. And then I guess salad making is pretty straightforward. I mean, you basically just dump everything in a bowl and mix it up. So
yeah,
I
well,
hope
for some
Olivia
people.
doesn't, I'm sorry.
I said for some people. I'm just drinking. So
okay. Well, I hope Olivia doesn't mind, but I am gonna nix the onions and the olives because they're just not my thing. But so I've got some small green beans. They have been trimmed and washed, and I've got the hard-boiled egg in here. I've got the thin strips of green and red bell pepper. I've got the sliced and diced cucumber right here. The tomatoes, and I'm going to use spinach as my base instead of just the regular hearts of romaine. So basically we just place this, oh, and the tuna fish right here. So basically we just place this in a bowl and arrange to form an attractive mixture in salad bowl. I'm not sure totally what that means, but I'm just going to put it all in here, see how it works out.
Did you blanch the green beans, or are they just fresh and snipped?
What does blanching mean?
Do you know, I can talk about cooking. I'm terrible at it, but I can talk it's lightly steamed.
Oh, that I did not do.
I didn't know. I didn't know if the
Did I do
recipe
that?
required it.
Should I steam them or cook them or?
No.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to add the bell pepper, add everything into the salad bowl. Since this recipe is so simple to make, it will take us a lot more time to talk about Olivia.
Which is great. I'm delighted.
Mix everything in here.
And I love your dishware. We were talking about it.
Yeah, I have a little tiny collection of two of everything of the 1930s Sierra pinwheel glass.
Beautiful.
Which I love. It's very very Art Deco. And
is that clear? Does it have a light green tint or?
it's very light green.
It's gorgeous.
Then, yeah, it's
Beautiful.
a pale green color, and you can also find it in pink too. Okay, so here is what the final product looks like.
Gorgeous.
Nice and beautiful. And here's the salad dressing. So so yeah, the final product is done.
Oh, I wish I were there.
I do too. So let's talk all about Olivia. And we've got so much to talk about. I've got like a whole long list here of things, but what is your most favorite Olivia De Havilland film and why?
Boy. I would say the best film, her best film, is probably The Heiress. I think the script is very powerful. You know, you're working with Henry James. Look at the score. God, Aaron Copland. The acting is superb, and it's, to me, it's just.
Okay, so Victoria froze, but she will be back in just a minute, so stay tuned. Had a few Wi-Fi issues today going on. Okay, Crystal Lawler saying The Heiress is also her favorite film too. Is that fish in that fishbowl? Let's see. Ah, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry, it's my Wi-Fi, so this is going to happen. So I'm sorry. Can you
talk about The Heiress?
There we are. Okay. So anyway, she always maintained that doing a good character was more challenging as an actress. And like you said about Melanie, that's very true. I think that's why she's so wonderful in Melanie. But God, I love her in Hush Hush. I don't know if you've seen the drag version, Hush Up, Sweet Charlotte.
Oh, I haven't, but I'd love to.
Fabulous. I think it's on Netflix or Prime. It's really fun. So those are my two. What about you?
You know, I love Hold Back the Dawn, and a few years back, it was impossible to find it except unless you recorded it off TCM. And I was lucky enough, there was a few years ago, they did a Mitchell Lyson retrospective at the UCLA Film Archive, which is kind of my home away from home. I call it my unofficial grad school because I feel like it has been. But I saw a beautiful print of it on film in a theater and I fell in love. And I came home and realized it was not on home video. And I was so just, frustrated with that. But it finally has gotten a DVD release and I've seen it now several times. There's such a tenderness to that movie. And I think Mitchell Lyson is very underrated because I think maybe Wilder and Preston Sturges didn't like him and stuff, but I think there's such a beauty and a tenderness to his movies that I just really find profound. And Hold Back the Dawn, she's so moving in that film. And it's not a flashy or showy performance or anything like that, but it's one of those that just kind of sneaks up on you.
That's beautifully said, really, Carrie. I don't know if you know, it was on TCM yesterday.
It was. And The Heiress was on the other day. So
I know.
Yeah.
And I've been watching them and I knew it was on and I've got it. I found it in Paris 10 years ago at a place called Fnac.
Yes, I
And
know Fnac. Yeah, I've
you
been
know,
there.
Fnac, they're great, but this was sort of like in Les Halles. It was sort of on a side street. Anyway, it was €5, and it was it's but a really good print, and that was how I was able to see it and write about it for the book. And now, thankfully, it's available. But I was watching it with my friend Stephen, and both of us were saying, I said, she's really sexy in this. I mean, she was always attractive. She's always lovely. She's more interesting than any run-of-the-mill ingenue. But that scene when she comes out of the water and her hair is floating and he grabs her and he lays one on her, Charles Boyer. Wow. And I think, I think that's who Olivia was privately. And she loved Charles Boyer. And I think, that moment comes through also because she loved Mitchell Leisen so much. She was so safe with him as a director. And that film is so timely now, isn't it? God, it's heartbreaking about immigrants and the border and how do we manage that, and what happens uh, when people are given an opportunity to transform, and they do. It's just beautiful. I think it's a gorgeous film.
And Mitchell Leisen directed Olivia in several films. Didn't he? He directed To Each His Own, right?
Yes, and that's the first Oscar win. And by the way, the dress she's wearing is an Anne Lowe. When she got the award, Anne Lowe was the African-American designer who had done Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress.
Oh.
And what a wonderful kind of connection that is. But that's thanks to Mitchell Leisen. But a lot of those directors, Cukor, I think Robert Z. Leonard at MGM in the 30s, these guys were studio guys, and they could do anything. And I think they've been underrated by history. You don't have to be an auteur to be a fantastic director.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of filmmakers and a lot of stars really too that kind of haven't quite gotten their critical due, if you will.
And I've always felt that about Olivia. That was one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. And yeah, it was personal too. I mean, I adored her. But just stepping back, and I've taught a lot of cinema courses, there were just a lot of women. Norma Shearer is another, who were really tough women who make women today possible. And I think that we need to look at that and review their film, review their personal lives, and I think get some inspiration from it. And certainly Olivia is one of them.
Well, another thing that's always inspired me about Olivia is her fight against Warner Brothers. She basically was a massive crack in the dam of breaking the studio system, of basically suing Warner Brothers. And had she lost the case, of course, it could have been career suicide. As you mentioned the other day and reminded me, she didn't even work for a few years as a result of this. So yeah. Let's talk about that case and what that meant to Olivia's life and to film history in general.
Well, the De Havilland decision is essentially a decision that was made ultimately by the California Supreme Court. Went through different courts, and then they Warner Brothers appealed, blah, blah, blah. But basically what it says is, if you sign a contract for X amount of time and things happen and you weren't able to fulfill that contract, that doesn't mean that the business with your contract gets to add that time on at the end. It's anti-peonage. That's what it is. And, she and Jack Warner were like this. Betty Davis, remember, had tried to sue him in 1936. She took off to Britain, but he was going to take her to court. He was going to sue her, but they negotiated a deal. Olivia was really serious about her career. She's careening toward 30, which is a dangerous age for an actress, and 40 is coming up. And she wanted to have a better career, and Warner wasn't giving her the roles. Everything she got that was good while she was under contract was while she was on loan out. So finally her career's going to be done. And Jack Warner goes, hey, guess what? You were on suspension a lot, because she was ill, or she was just not going to do a movie. So he said, we're going to add 6 months. And she said, I don't think so. So she didn't work on screen for 2 years, but she won. And the year later, she wins the first Oscar. And then in 48, she does Snake Pit. And then in 49, she does The Heiress. So by the end of 1949, she is the biggest star in Hollywood.
And she certainly was proven correct in doing what she did to break that stranglehold that they had over actors.
Yeah, they did. And now there was a lot that was great about the studio too, and I think it would be very scary. Look at how scary it was for Joan Crawford. When she hit the wall in 43, coincidentally, the same time as Olivia's leaving Warner's, Joan didn't work for 2 years and she comes back to Warner's, and then she gets Mildred Pierce. These were women who were laying it on the line for their career. And they were doing it in the 1940s. Come on. Any woman who's had a career, certainly in America, has had to fight. We've all had to do it. And women like that stood up for what they believed in. So I just think, people like Olivia need to get credit where it's due. And I was delighted in her obituaries. Everybody was like, yeah, they all recognized how important she was to the history of Hollywood, and to independence in Hollywood. But on the other hand, it's a shame because, man, the studio system was a great training ground.
It was a mixed bag for sure.
Yeah, it certainly was. But for Olivia, boy, she was great. And then she got out in time. She got out in time so that she didn't have to do the things that Betty and Joan and Lana Turner and a lot of others had to do, and men too. She was able to live a life that had more elegance and more agency to it.
Because I think we were talking about this the other day. I think part of it was that some of these stars just didn't have anything else in their lives except the work. And then probably part of it too was just money. They were supporting so many other people. They just had to constantly keep cranking out, even if it was a crappy movie, a sitcom, whatever it was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think, in fact, did you watch Feud, Ryan Murphy's Feud?
Yes, I did.
And of course, Olivia took him to court because he didn't consult her. And if he'd only consulted her, it was basically insulting her for her age, I think. But anyway, I think that program was very good in its depiction of what Betty and Joan were forced to do, to keep a roof over their head, to keep their kids in school, to pay for husbands, to pay for mothers and brothers, and, extended family. It was really hard. And Olivia, fortunately, didn't have that. Her sister Joan had her own career. Her mother was remarried, had her own career. Olivia's second husband, Pierre Gallant, was the editor-in-chief of Paris Match. She was a writer. So, she lived a very smart life. She made really smart choices. I think that's the other thing to remember about Olivia. She was brilliant. I wish she'd taught. I wish she had done French cinema, because there was just so much there.
Yeah, of course, I'm fascinated by the stars and their lives and their careers, but I always feel fascinated by life after Hollywood, because again, I think some of these stars too, like say Betty and Joan, as much as I love them, and I do, I feel like they couldn't walk away. Even if they wanted to, I don't think they could have. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
like
yeah.
It was very hard for them. And then others like say Norma Shearer or Garbo, they very easily were able to just go and do other things. So there seems to be kind of a very big difference between people that can kind of let it all go and people that can't, regardless of the money being an issue.
I think that's such a good point. Economic independence for women, is still an issue, you know?
Olivia just had other interests and other things she wanted to do, and just kind of a whole other life beyond, the movies.
Yeah, I think she was very bright in that way. You know, she turned down a full ride at Mills College uh, in order to sign with Warner Brothers, and which was a good move, you know. Um, but she did have other interests. And her marriage to Pierre Gallant, they were such good friends that even when the romantic part ended, they still lived together. Then he moved across the street. At the end of his life, she took care of him. She was interested in politics. She was interested in art. She was a writer. She wrote many articles over the years. When Mickey Rooney died in 2014, did you see the article she wrote about him for Time magazine?
Yeah.
It was lovely. It was just really lovely. She also had two children. She was involved with the American University of Paris. She just was a really well-rounded human being. And thankfully, she also had the financial independence and the good sense to leave Hollywood and to live in a place. I mean, Paris, come on. Oh, God.
It's magnificent.
Yeah. Oh, I'd move there now. I would just have to say to you, bye, and I would move now if I could. So I think she was a very wise woman. She worked when she wanted to. And I think she stopped working when she wanted to, because she did a really good interview with Leonard Maltin in the 90s. And she said, I would work, but send me a script. And there wasn't anything that was that great out there for her, I think. I asked her, in fact, why didn't she work in French film? Because she was fluent, but she said she didn't feel it was good enough for her to actually do a role. But I think she would have been wonderful. I wish she had.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole separate career right there in the French cinema.
I think it would have been great, because the French, come on, it's French cinema, it's fabulous. And she would have been a delight. But, again, she had other interests and other things that she was doing. And she's very close. Her son died in the early 90s. But her daughter Giselle lives in Malibu, and they were very, very close. So, and Olivia had friends. She was active in the church. She had a good life, a really good one.
I know this is probably going to come up in the Q&A, so we should probably go ahead and address the elephant in the room, and that is the notorious feud with she and her sister Joan Fontaine. So would you like to kind of explain that and tell us about that, and as you see it?
Sure. I think they were two really strong personalities, incredibly bright women, raised by an incredibly strong, bright mother who, left their father, got a divorce, raised them. She did remarry. The girls didn't get along terribly well with George Fontaine. They each went their own way. There wasn't that much of an age difference between them, but enough for I think, Olivia to sort of resent Joan a little bit. And I think for Joan to perhaps look at what Olivia was doing and go, that's neat, I'll try that. Just because you're siblings doesn't mean you're going to like each other, right?
That makes sense.
I think you're lucky if you're really close to your siblings. And so they both grew up, they were beautiful, they were in the same profession, and Joan got there first in a lot of the accolades. And I think that there were some problems with that. But I think their mother sort of went back and forth between who's my favorite daughter. I think Joan never felt, if you read her autobiography, she just never felt that she was her mother's favorite. Olivia did. And Olivia, a very strong person. So I think that especially in their 20s, Olivia's not married, Joan's married first. Oh, Joan's under contract, with Selznick. Joan's working with Hitchcock and Cary Grant. And what is Olivia doing? She's going, oh, please hurry back to Errol Flynn again. You know, I think you'd have to be a saint not to look at your baby sister and not to just feel a little bit of, ugh, you know. Also, they both were, they were very witty women. And some things they said about each other got back to each other. And I think finally, you know, they had their families, they lived in different countries. And I think the distance was a really healthy thing. And finally, after their mother's death, each has a different version of what happened. And I think that just kind of, that did it. But how unusual are they in families, if you think about it? You know, I mean, not everybody is cozy. However, Olivia was very close to Joan's daughter. And I think when Joan died, it's sad for what wasn't, but they just were different people.
I think it is an interesting dynamic that plays out. I mean, I'm close with my brother, but I've seen a lot of women that have a sister, which I don't have one, but I've seen women that have that. And there's a real kind of competitiveness with each other that exists for maybe the parents' affection, which one's the favorite. Like I've seen this play out with other people that I know. And that definitely is an interesting kind of power dynamic of who's the first to do this or that. And I think sometimes parents pit kids against each other. Like that happens. All sorts of things happen in families. They just happen to be a famous one.
I think that's right. I think what happened between them would happen if, you know, one had, I mean, they were both divorced, you know, both of them experienced loss. Their mother was divorced. You know, you have a different view. I don't think you've got this sort of, oh, Rose's romantic view of what life is like. And let's face it, they're both Hollywood actresses who are successful. You live out in LA. I mean, we were talking about it. I tried New York and LA, and I scampered like a bunny back to grad school, you know, because I think you've really got to be a strong person. And they were. But I think too, you know, you compete with your siblings, whether they're male or female. And God, you know, Joan does have the Oscar. And she's got a really good contract. While she's making Jane Eyre, Olivia's off work suing Jack Warner. God, it's hard. I just think it's hard. And as you say, I think it plays out a lot. I don't think they're the only sisters, you know, or the only friends for that matter. You know, Olivia talked about her friendship with Betty. Betty was 8 years older. They were both at Warner's. It took a while for Betty to warm up to Olivia, right?
Well, because a lot of actresses, I talk about this on the cemetery tour at one point, because I think we live in a society that pits women against each other constantly. And of course, that was also kind of a theme of Feud as well. And there's this mentality that often seeps in of, oh, there's room for one woman, period, and that person's going to be me. And it kind of, I hate that attitude, because I love the attitude of, let's be friends, let's be colleagues, let's support each other, let's, you know, be in each other's life. Like I like the more of a embracing attitude as opposed to the everybody's a vicious competitor. But again, I think it's also a product of the times too, which I hope are changing. And
I think they're changing now. But I think about, you know, when I was going to grad school in the 70s and 80s, I had one mentor that whole time and one woman. I had like 2 female teachers the whole time, you know, through the MA and the PhD. There were like, I don't know, a handful of women on the reading list. That's not that long ago. I mean, that was 86 when I finished. God, that's not that long ago.
no, it's not.
You
And I
know,
think Betty, she was so powerful. She was the top woman at Warner Brothers for such a long time that maybe anyone that's younger and coming up is kind of perceived as a threat. But they were such radically different types, you know.
yes.
And we see that, and of course, In This Our Life, which Joan and Olivia made a lot of movies together, but definitely in This Our Life, I think you really see they were just such different actresses.
They were, but you know, there again, Betty plays the bad girl because it's the showier role. But there are reports of Betty being angry because John Huston directed it, and he and Olivia started their affair, during that time. And so even then, there was a bit of difficulty, but I think Betty finally came to trust Olivia and kind of went, yeah, we are different types, we are different people, and she respects me. And I think, Olivia was there for her. And I think after time, Betty finally got over that. But hey, it's hard. If there's a great role, I mean, I've got a master's in theater. It's tough, even on my level, which was, university and community theater and that kind of stuff, a little bit of professional stuff. Man, it's competitive, it's competitive. And to do that in public, oh God, I admire anybody who makes a living out there. Well done. They're tough.
Yeah. And I do love their friendship though, because there are a lot of pictures floating around of Betty and Olivia hanging out as friends. And I do appreciate that they finally were able to have that.
I think they did, like I've got these two dresses hanging behind me, you can see.
Oh, let's see the dresses. Let's see the dresses.
Okay, I'm trying to. This one, can you see a little bit of it at any rate?
Mm-hmm.
It's a caftan. It was designed by Edith Head. And Olivia wore it in 1977 at the Betty Davis AFI tribute. It was made by Western Costume, which I love, because we used to rent stuff from them. But Olivia wore this for Betty's AFI tribute, which I think is wonderful. And then the other one, I'm just going to lay it here. The other one Olivia wore in 1988 at the Oscars. Isn't that marvelous?
I love that color of red.
Oh, it's gorgeous. And she looks beautiful in it. There are a lot of photos of her online. And this came with the bag. And I'm wearing, because God, I wish I could fit into those. Are you kidding? I'm wearing the ring and the earrings that went with the red dress. And I got it from this auction. So anyway, to bring it back to Betty, back even in 1977, there's Olivia, who never got an AFI, giving one to Betty. And they were good friends, I think. And of course, Olivia's the one who steps in for Joan after Hush Hush.
I heard that that was Betty's idea and she really wanted her.
She flew, in fact, the director.
Robert Aldrich.
Thank you. I could see him. Robert Aldrich flew to Switzerland to convince Olivia and made it worth her while. And then there's that wonderful picture of all of them on sets standing around a Coke dispenser. But yeah, and I think they enjoyed working together, and Joseph Cotton's in it. I mean, that's a really good film. I think underrated. So I wanted to bid, in fact, this green dress. Can you see this one?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's the one that Olivia wore, one of the ones that she wore in Hush Hush. But I hadn't realized it was designed by Dior. And the Dior, when the auction came around, the Dior Foundation bid, and they won it, of course. But
one cannot outbid Dior.
No, one would if one could, but one could not, so one did not. But I got lucky on those two dresses, and it's wonderful to have something of hers. It's really cool.
Oh,
you have stuff like that?
Not really. It's funny, whenever people have come to my apartment, they always seem to be a bit shocked there's not tons of Hollywood memorabilia. And I'm like, well, in my experience, you need money and also a lot of space, which I'm kind of low on both of those things. I do have a few things people have given me over the years. I have a window card from Clara Bow's The Wild Party from 1929.
Do you really? Oh, yeah. Wow, what a treasure.
I love it. And I've got a few photographs and letters, but again, not a lot of stuff, just little bits that people have given me over the years. And of course I cherish, but
But look what you're wearing. I mean, I love your dress. We were talking about it, that and the tablecloth and your depression glass, and that's all 1930s. I love that when you can live with things that matter to you. You know, it's
Yeah, a
cool.
friend of mine is 90 and she, before the pandemic, of course, came to my apartment for breakfast one morning and she looked around and she goes, "This is like my childhood. This is so true." And I said, "That means I'm getting it right."
Oh,
So,
I
let's see
love
who's
that.
asking us questions online here.
Okay.
Danny Miller says 3 bottles of champagne for 2 people. I would have been on the floor. Do you remember what kind of champagne?
Yes, it was at that time it was Mums. It was 3 bottles of Mums. But then she changed her mind. The next time I saw her, I had emailed her assistant, and her assistant said she had sort of switched to pink Tattinger or Tattinger. So I managed to get a big bottle of it at the airport. But yeah, 3 bottles, and that was over 4 hours. And I had to walk from her house in the 16th arrondissement in the dark. It was about 10:30 to the metro, and then go 4 stops and walk 2 blocks. I rented a flat, and I was bombed, but it was I was hammered, but I was so happy. And then I got to my flat and I had free international calling, and I called everybody. I called everybody. It's like, I just got drunk with Olivia De Havilland. It was fabulous.
I would have had to crawl out of the.
Honest to God. But yes, and after that, it was so fun though. The last time I saw her was November 2017, and I brought a bottle of Tattinger, and she said, "Well, my doctor has said I can only have 1 bottle." And she said I should actually only have 1 glass, but we actually killed a bottle. We had a good time. It was fun.
Danny Miller saying, "Have you seen her musical number with Ida Lupino in Thank Your Lucky Stars?"
Yes, it's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, you can tell. I give her great credit, she and Ida both, because they're mugging like crazy, and George Tobias, um, and doing their best. I think it's really sweet. And, she did a lot at the Hollywood Canteen too, because again, she wasn't working. So she did some USO tours. So yeah, that's really actually a sweet movie. I don't know if you've ever watched that, Carrie.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I should rewatch that.
It's worth rewatching. I watched it a couple weeks ago, and it's really sweet. So yeah, I think it's fun.
Let's see here. Okay, Lucky Heiss, who is the
Hi,
friend that
Lucky.
got us together. Shout out to Lucky. Victoria, do you want to talk more about Anne Lowe and her contribution to Hollywood and American culture, since she provided the wedding dress for Jacqueline Bouvier?
Yes, sure. Anne Lowe, there's a really good article in the New Yorker within the last year or so. I don't know if you saw it, Carrie, but it's about Anne Lowe and how her reputation as a couture designer, and then as an African-American woman, is sort of being restored finally and recognized. And she did design Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, and there was a bit of something that was a bit of a kerfuffle about it, that Jackie had said something later, but they smoothed it over. But it is a beautiful dress, and she ended up declaring bankruptcy and was back and forth in favor. But she was her own person and ran her own atelier. And when Olivia won the first Oscar for To Each His Own, Mitchell Lizen, she chose an Anne Lowe dress. And it's lovely. There are color photos of it. I've got black and white in the book, but it was a blue, sort of like that, like a powder blue with appliques of pink, and there was net. And Anne Lowe really liked appliques quite a bit. And they've been able to restore several of her dresses. But anyway, I love the fact that Olivia wore that Anne Lowe to that first Oscar award. So I'm delighted too that Anne Lowe is being rediscovered finally. It's really great when we can see the actual artistry, of a a couturier.
Where is that Anne Lowe dress she wore to the Oscars? Where is that in an archive now? Or
That is such a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I have actually thought about that, and I'm trying to find out, actually. I've emailed, or I'm going to email her daughter, but I've also tried to find out through the her first auction. She had an auction in '93. Olivia liked Anne Lowe, but she also loved Edith Head. She had a long working relationship with Edith Head and Dior. So there was a big auction in '93, and then the second one that happened just a few years ago. So when I find out, I'll let you know.
oh, that'd be great.
I'd love to see it, and it would be wonderful if it could go into an Anne Lowe archive.
Oh,
So
yes, yes.
I'd love to find it.
Another question is, did you and Olivia ever talk about the legacy of Gone with the Wind? Because as we know, it's a racist film on many levels. It is got a lot of issues on a lot of levels, and there's been a lot of discussion about it, a lot of controversy about it. And luckily, Turner Classic Movies has been kind of putting films in perspective.
Yeah, they
And I
have.
even went to a panel at TCM Fest a few years ago about the complicated legacy of Gone with the Wind. I've always felt Hattie McDaniel's character was the soul of the movie, because she's the only one who tells the truth about to Scarlett and to everybody. And to me, she's like the moral compass of that film. How did Olivia feel about that movie in decades worth of hindsight?
She was very proud of the film. And to be honest with you, it's within the last couple of years with BLM that it's been controversial since it was made. Yeah. But it's been in the last few years that, for example, they were going to show it in Atlanta and they changed their minds. Olivia and I didn't talk about it. When I thought about bringing it up to her, but by that time we were emailing back and forth. Sometimes I would, send her a clipping or something like that, or a link. But we really didn't talk about it because I think she was very proud of it. She did acknowledge that when she was younger, she was hurt that she didn't win best supporting actress. She did work with Hattie McDaniel quite a bit. And I did ask her about Hattie McDaniel, and she said, we weren't really friends because you weren't friends with anybody. You said hi, you knew each other, but everybody was on the set the next day. So I think Olivia sort of did her bit, but I think she was so pleased about it that I don't think she would have shied away from the controversy, certainly. But I think certainly she was very proud of it, and I'm kind of glad that she doesn't have to experience it. Not that she would shy away from it. I'm not saying that at all, because obviously it's there. I agree with you, though. I always felt that the real love affair was between Melanie and Rhett. The real unrequited love was the two of them. I didn't think it was Scarlett and Ashley at all. And I always felt Mammy, as you said, Mammy's the spine of the entire thing. Without her, there's nothing. So I didn't view her that way, but I'm a white woman who came of age in the 60s. I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I'm also glad that it's still being viewed. And I think TCM is really smart about the way they're handling it, for sure.
I agree, because I feel like banning it is not the right thing, but talking about it, putting it in context, understanding and dissecting it is, the right thing to do.
Do you know, there's a really good book that came out a few years ago, and it came out of UT Austin about the making of Gone with the Wind, because they've got the Selznick archive there. And they were aware of it when they were putting it together. I think of it very much a feminist film, and I always have. I think it's the women that drive it and the women who save the South. And the book is really good. Have you seen it? It's a big coffee table kind of book.
I've seen it. I don't have it in my collection, but I have seen that book. Yeah.
But it really does. It addresses that issue really well. The issues of race, certainly, and the issues of the problems of the South at the time, that the book and the film appeared. I think, though, for me, I look at both of those women and I just think, it's two sides of the same coin. And maybe at the end of the film, you hope that Scarlett will grow up. but you can also understand that Scarlett and Melanie both, they're doing the best they can do in a time of war. To me, it's about women at war. And for that, I find it very inspiring indeed.
All right, let's see. What are the questions? Oh, Krista Lawler makes a very good point, Victoria. She says, Snake Pit should have won an Academy Award, film ahead of its time, bringing mental health to light.
Boy, for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, Olivia dealt when she was in her 20s. You know, I mentioned that she had taken suspension several times. She was ill. She was physically ill. She would become physically ill with frustration. You know, I mean, yes, take some time, but would lose weight, would get under 100 pounds, and she was 5'4", you know. I think that Olivia struggled with that. Not that she was depressive, but she certainly knew what it was like to emotionally respond and physically respond to things. And so I think she was very interested in making films that had more weight to them. And one of her issues was mental health. You know, The Dark Mirror. Oh, it's one of those twins movies, and I love twins movies, but, you know, it does deal with, in a very simple way, with psychopathy. The Snake Pit. Look at, again, it controversial, but Light in the Piazza. Also, what's the right thing to do? What's the right choice? How do you mainstream? You know, mainstreaming was quite controversial at the time. And so I think Olivia was I think she was sensitive to it. And remember, again, too, you know, I mean, her son was ill. She had to deal with that. She dealt with her parents' divorce. She was, you know, she was a smart woman and took these things seriously. Have you ever seen Not as a Stranger?
Not that one, no.
It's one of those Ernest Stanley Kramer films, but she plays a nurse in that. I think she had an interest in well-being.
Catherine Zeta-Jones as Olivia was the biggest misstep in Feud, says Danny Miller.
I would have said the same thing. And when she got cast, I was horrified. I was like, are you kidding? Please. But you know what? I thought she was really good. I was surprised. I thought if I'm going to dislike anybody, it's going to be her. But I think she got her humor, you know? I think she got the ladylike quality that Olivia went with too much, I would say, in a way. I mean, I appreciated that about her. She was very elegant. But I think like I said, I wish she'd taken more chances. I mean, maybe she saw what other people did and thought, no, thank you.
I have mixed feelings about that series. There's things I liked about it and things I didn't. So it's kind of a mixed bag for me. But I was glad that half those episodes were directed by women. Yes. And Ryan Murphy also gives jobs to a lot of women over 40 in Hollywood. So for those two reasons alone, I do have to applaud the man.
I do too. And I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was a strange choice. But again, I thought she moved well. And I thought she caught that underlying humor that Olivia had. I was surprised that I liked her as much as I did. But when she was first cast, I was a bit put out. I did like Kathy Bates an awful lot as Joan Blondell, of course, you know, and I was glad that they did at least showed the 63 Oscars and showed that Olivia supported Betty.
Yeah.
Again, who knows? There's so much that went on, you know. Olivia was discreet.
Jody Smith is saying the shoes. Don't forget the shoes.
Oh, God, yes, Jody's a friend. These are the shoes that go with the purple dress. And they're made by Rain, who are a British company, or were, that made shoes for the royal family. And I was able to get them on, but they're very narrow. But notice they've got a 2.5-inch heel. They're a silk, they're a lavender silk. And they go with the dress, and they're marvelous. I can get them on, but to try to stand in them is pointless, but they're marvelous.
What size are they?
Hmm?
What size are they?
They're 7. They're 7. Is that your size?
It is, but they're narrow though, right?
They're narrow.
See, I'm not, unfortunately, I can't do narrow. It's
Yeah.
hard.
I was able to get them on, but I wasn't able to do anything more than that. But I'm just so glad to have them. And I've got an old dress form from the 1930s. And so I swapped them out. And so it's nice to see them. But I just feel really lucky that I have them. And I have a couple of books that she autographed to me as well. So I feel really fortunate.
My friend
And
Benjamin,
about 30 or 40 letters over the years as well.
my friend Benjamin in Germany is asking, was Olivia interested in watching old movies in the later years? What actor who did she consider to be a good actor or actress?
Okay. Well, she did respect Betty enormously, very much. And she loved Charles Boyer or Charles Boyer. She really loved working with him. And you can see it in Hold Back the Dawn. You know, he's very, very good. Without a doubt. Ask me again. Tell me what the rest of the question was.
I'm sure. What did she watch older movies in the later years?
She watched later. She did. I mean, she certainly rewatched some things like, for example, Gone with the Wind. She did rewatch, and she used to go to events before, you know, she couldn't anymore, you know, in the 2000s because she was in her 80s at that point, but certainly still, but when she hit her 90s, I think that was sort of the end of the Hollywood visits. She does write though. She talked about rewatching Midsummer Night's Dream when Mickey Rooney died, and she's lovely in it. You know, it's her first film. And I think she also, of course, talked about rewatching Robin Hood just 2 weeks before Flynn died, and tells that story about wanting to write to him. And also Betty Davis had also rewatched Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex and wanted to write to him, but thought, oh no, he'll just think I'm being sentimental. And then of course he died of a heart attack. So she did write those or watch those, but she lived very much in the present. You know, I mean, she had a wide correspondence. I have a very good friend, Anne Marie, who lives in Australia and was going to law school and had a letter from Olivia, you know, but I don't think she, you know, she wasn't, we were talking about this. Some people couldn't seem to leave the past behind, but that wasn't Olivia at all. Not at all.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack Fields. Hey, Jack. Jack Fields is saying, close as Olivia and Betty were, I don't think I've ever heard Olivia speak about Joan. Any comments you know of? I assume that means Joan Crawford, Jack, right?
She talked very briefly to the press, but no, she didn't make comments about Joan. They weren't, it was a stressful situation replacing her in Hush Hush. Again, Aldrich had to fly to Switzerland to convince her to do it. Joan said something about Olivia like, well, I'm glad she needs the work, you know. But Olivia she wasn't a cat, you know. She didn't make those comments aren't out there. And I love trash as much as anybody, you know. I love reading, oh, so and so said this or that, you know. I mean, it's fun. We've all owned Hollywood Babylon, but you know, she was discreet. She really was. If she got angry, like, you know, when Michael Caine wrote in his autobiography that they made the swarm and that she at Warner Brothers, and she pointed up to the hills and said something about losing her virginity up there. And then Michael Caine quoted her in his book and she denied it, you know, through Robert Osborne. But other than that, she just kept her mouth shut. She wasn't stupid.
Krista Lawler is saying, what is Olivia De Havilland's favorite film?
She loved Gone with the Wind. She loved Gone with the Wind. She also loved Making to Each His Own. Making the Heiress wasn't that happy. You know, Monty Clift was doing Method. Ralph Richardson is doing British Stage. There's Olivia listening to William Wyler, to everything he has to say, because, you know, he guided Betty. Three different styles clashing. I don't think it wasn't a fun shoot, but she did enjoy shooting To Each His Own, without a doubt. And of course, Gone with the Wind, she was very proud of it. She appreciated that it had survived all that time. And come on, she was a working actress.
Yeah. I love the story about her convincing Ann Warner, Jack Warner's wife, to, you know, approve the loan out. That was very smart, going to the wife instead of, you know, that was a really clever move.
I think she was very, very bright. Her mother was smart. Her sister was smart. I think Olivia gets in. I mean, she graduates from high school and starts already doing the play of Midsummer at 17, going on 18. She got into the business really young. And so by the time she's 20, good grief. I mean, you would grow up fast in that business, right? How could you not? So clearly she knew what she was doing. So to go to Ann Warner was really, it's the same thing as becoming friends with Edith Head. I'm not saying that wasn't a real friendship. It's like Barbara Stanwyck and Edith Head. They knew, or Crawford, be friends with the crew. They're the people that are going to fit you, that are going to light you.
Make you look good.
They're going to make you look good, and they're going to be beside you, and they're going to remember you. You know, they're going to be the ones who remember, of course, when Norma Desmond goes to the stage in Sunset Boulevard, and it's the crew that claps. It's the same thing. So I think that those were films that she liked. Now, she was actually, I can't watch it. Lady in a Cage. Ooh. Have you seen it?
Not in a long time. I'd have to rewatch that one.
Hard to watch. She defended it quite vehemently in the press, but she was actually quite proud of it, because again, I think it's old Hollywood and new Hollywood. And at least she's making that was such a difficult time. So I think, you know, you've got the old studio, you've got new Hollywood coming in. I think the fact that she made that film, and I think won some awards for it, I think she was quite proud of that.
Leslie Apple is saying, Olivia owned an Airedale named Shadrach. I'm an Airedale lover. Do you know anything about Shadrach?
Yeah, she got Shadrach from John Huston. And John Huston was the great romance. Olivia always loved animals. She always loved animals. Joan did too. In fact, Joan left when she died much of her, if not all of her estate, I don't want to be wrong, but a great deal of it, to the ASPCA. And Olivia was really good at making barking sounds. Remember in Princess O'Rourke, where you've got the black Scotty, that Fala, right? FDR's dog. So Houston was going off. Remember, he goes off to war, he shoots film. Mm-hmm. She's traveling around, and he gave her Shadrach. And so she kept him, and her first husband then, who she married in 48, was not happy about having Shadrach around, but that was her dog. And in fact, the last time I saw her, we were talking because she'd gotten her pug, Oscar. And there's a picture in the book. Giselle has Oscar now. Oscar lives in Malibu. He's got a girlfriend. Yes, the pug, yes. He's got a girlfriend, and he's doing okay. And he sheds a lot. But Olivia got the pug. And I said, I walked in and we had our champagne, and I said, well, I understand, you know, I know you do a really good dog bark. And Olivia, she's 101. Yes, 101. She goes, arf, 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 arf. And I barked. So we started barking at each other, and then we drank. So that's Shadrach. She had him until he passed away.
Jack Fields is asking, how was Olivia's relationship with William Wyler?
It was good. She loved him. She was really pleased to get him as the director for The Heiress, because remember, he was Betty Davis's lover, and then he directed her to Jezebel, Little Foxes, The Letter. So her relationship with Wyler was very respectful. she came up, she broke the studio system, but she came up in it. She had the first Oscar. The Heiress was quite a prestigious production in New York, you know. This was a big deal. You've got Aaron Copland, you've got Ralph Richardson, good grief. You've got the heartthrob of the moment. You've got Monty Clift. This was huge. So she respected Wyler. She liked him. She listened to him, but it drove Monty Clift crazy because she wasn't going to be an improvisational person. That wasn't going to be her training. And in fact, she talked about it. She said, I didn't have any particular training, but I listened to my directors and I did my research. You know, I think I would think of her as a collaborative actress, you know, and he got her the Oscar. So that was a good relationship.
Danny Miller is asking, do any of her Melanie costumes exist? I know they were selling Gone with the Wind jewelry recently at auction.
Well, that's a really good question. One, I don't know for certain. I know that I mentioned at UT Austin, they've got the Selznick archive. And I know that Olivia had wanted her archive to be left to a university someplace, but she wasn't sure where, you know, that hasn't been decided yet. I did see the green dress in Austin 2 years ago, and that is there. I'm not sure what else is there, whether they've got any of her Melanie dresses or not. And that's such a really good question, and I should have the answer to that. I know that Debbie Reynolds had one of her dresses from Elizabeth in Essex in her first auction. But I'm not sure if the Melanie dresses exist or not. But a great way to find out actually would be to email UT Austin and ask I can't think of the name of the woman who is in charge of the archive, but she was fantastic and so kind and so helpful.
Emmy Perryman is saying Olivia deserved an AFI Lifetime Achievement. Why do you think she didn't get it?
Why don't any women have it? I think because she left Hollywood. You know, I mean, they gave it to Tom Hanks at 46. 46. I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he's a good guy. I think he's done a lot. But I think, you know, she stopped, her last performances in 1988. She dared to do television. Everybody does television now. Hello. I think too, because she dared maybe to not only leave, who knows what enemies she made by taking Warner Brothers to court. I mean, who knows? God, Carrie, you live there.
Well, another thing is too, I know that in recent years, there's been kind of a pressure on the AFI because I think that the awards is also a ratings thing, a publicity thing. And if there's kind of a perception, and I don't think it's right, because I think seniors are total badasses, but I think there's a perception, oh, it's the old geezer award. They want to reward it to people, quote, in mid-career, because ergo, they're still going to be, quote unquote, relevant and get ratings. And I think that's why in recent years, there's been a big push to honor people that are in the middle of it instead of people that are toward the end of their lives. I think it's a ratings thing, it's a perception thing, it's a trendy, hip publicity. I think there's a lot of reasons for it, to be honest. And
I agree with you. I also think it's misogynist, you know, because you can give it to an elderly man, or you can honor a Sean Connery or do whatever, you know. So I think it's there too. But yeah, of course, it's one of the tragedies to me that they're not made, and they never were given really for the work, but she should have had one. Jenna Rollins should have one. There were a lot of people that should have had them. And if for nothing else, if she had never worked again for the De Havilland decision, you know, they should have given it to her. And I'm sorry that they didn't. I don't know anything behind the scenes. I don't know if it was offered and turned down, but I doubt it, or else she wouldn't have appeared at Betty's, you know, in 77. She's also at the Hitchcock. You can see her in the background at some of the tables. So clearly, as you say, Carrie, I'm not going to take away from new generations, not at all. But God, older generations got us where we are. And I hate when they roll people out in a wheelchair and a week later they're dead. I mean, do it while people are conscious. That was where Ryan Murphy got in trouble. Why not talk to her? But instead you go ahead, you do this. Do you not know she's litigious? Do you not know your film
She's
history?
formidable.
Yes, and formidable and triumphant. I mean, yes, she didn't win and the Supreme Court refused to listen to it. But the fact that she took it that far, come on. I mean, so I would hope that we would learn from this and that people that are around and conscious and are not infirm in mind and body could be respected and honored and talked to.
Well, here's my take on award stuff, that the gospel according to me, I guess. On my cemetery tour, I think a lot about legacy, and I think a lot about history, and I think a lot about what people leave behind, because it's kind of part of what I do.
Sure.
And having worked in the industry as well, awards matter, but they kind of don't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Can you tell me who won Best Actress Oscar 2 years ago, for example? You know what I mean?
Yes,
To
I know.
99% of the people, unless they are Oscar trivia, you know what I mean? They're not going to remember. And a lot of these awards, again, they mean something and they don't mean something. What I look at it is, and I say this on every single tour I've given for like almost 20 years, is that I can show you the grades, I can tell you the stories, the movies are how they live on. Watch the movies, because I think time and their art, and that is what ultimately matters. So, I don't think people are going to people might see the heiress and not even know she won the Oscar, but they're going to be moved by the heiress. So I think the work itself is really what matters. Everything else is kind of noise.
I agree with you, and I think she would agree with you too. I think any working actor has to know. It's wonderful to get awards. It's great to win prizes. I don't care what field you're in, because you feel that people noticed you. It's like, thank you. Yes, I am working my ass off here. Thank you very much. But look at the field. Look at the profession. Whether you're an actor or you're a teacher or you're a writer or you're all of those things or whatever, the world is wide. And ultimately, you'd better love what you're doing, because that's really the most important thing, isn't it? Everything just scatters away. And because we're talking about film, what a pleasure. I mean, kids can rediscover Robin Hood. It's such a great movie. It's so much fun, and it's beautiful, and everybody's pretty, and bad people die and good people live, and she's part of that, and she's part of Gone with the Wind, and they all are. And aren't we lucky that we love them so much? I mean, with your job, taking people around Hollywood Forever, I did that tour with Scott Michaels. You just are so grateful. It's like, thank you, Greg Toland. Thank you, Ty Power. Thank you, Hattie McDaniel's cenotaph. Thanks to the Ramones. Just thank you for enriching us and your art defining us. Aren't we privileged?
And I feel like when I was a kid, and I'm sure you probably felt this way too, you just had to wait for a lot of stuff to come on TV. And then if you missed it, that was it. And then these big VHS tapes. And now when I get younger people on the tour, I tell them, I just said this yesterday, in fact, I say, you guys are so lucky to be growing up at a time when there's Kino Lorber, the Criterion Channel, Turner Classic Movies. I mean, it is literally at your fingertips to find a giant array of this art,
Oh God, I mean, so lucky. And I mean, like I said, I grew up in central Wisconsin in the 60s. We had 3 TV channels, and if it rained, you got the 2 from Wausau. Otherwise, forget it. So to see Gone with the Wind, and then it was gone. I mean, it was here and it was Gone with the Wind. that was a huge deal, to see Woodstock was massive. I remember, I mean, I think I didn't buy my first VHS until 87 or 88, and then to finally have access to that stuff, it was monumental. It was incredible.
And
So I think, go ahead.
I feel so grateful to live in Hollywood where, I mean, before
Oh.
the pandemic, this is where I've had the withdrawals. I used to go to UCLA Archive all the time, the American Cinematheque all the time, like so many of these, the American Legion, all these wonderful theaters that show classic films on a big screen, often on actual film. Like, I miss that more than words can say, and I know it's coming back now. So I'm grateful that I live in a world where I'm able to experience that.
Well, do you know, of course, with the pandemic, it's been difficult for everybody. Here in Minneapolis, the Heights, which is a restored 1926 theater with dreadfully wonderful chandeliers and a Wurlitzer, and then a smaller place called the Trilon. In the last month, I've been able to see Fargo on the big screen again. And of course, I mean, we live in Fargo almost just about, but not really. And to see Vertigo on the big screen, and me in St. Louis, and the 1913, 1916, Sherlock Holmes, I mean, come on, it's just marvelous. And I have to say, the older I get, the more grateful I am for these reminders. It's kind of like growing up with the movies when you watch them. It's like listening to music. It's like favorite art. It's like, 70s clothes coming back, and then 80s. You get to relive your life through the art. And we're lucky with that.
Well, let's see if we have any more questions before we wrap up here. Gary Songer is asking, did Olivia ever mention how it was working with Ralph Richardson?
No, she did not. Now, she talked about it in other places, and I do quote some things in the book. He was dismissive of her. But I think one of the things you've got to think about, his stage training, I mean, she had done Midsummer, and then she's a movie actress. Yeah. And yes, she did do stage. She did Romeo and Juliet. She toured in Canada. I mean, she went back, but he's coming from that British tradition, which still exists, of it's a small island. So if you are trained and you're British, you're going to do TV, and you're going to do film, and you're going to do the provinces, and you're going to do London, and then you're going to head up to the Edinburgh Festival. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think he looked at her, I think he looked down at her a bit, and she talked about it, but not directly with me. But we did talk, though, about her doing the part. We talked about how she worked with Edith Head with the clothing. We also talked about the transformation, from, there's not really makeup, the hair is different, but that last half hour, that devastating half hour, that's the face. We talked about how the costume helped her transform within, the interior to the exterior. And she was so proud of it. She was so proud of that film. She loved that film. And of course, and two, of course, she's married. She's going to have her first child. I mean, this was huge. It was huge on a lot of levels, and she was really pleased with it.
We'll take a few more questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
Benjamin is asking, is it true she turned down A Streetcar Named Desire? Did she regret not having made a certain movie?
I asked her about that the first time we met, because I love Tennessee Williams. I mean, part of it is growing up with a Southern belle for a mother, but I mean, the greatest dramatist of the second part of the 20th century, in my humble opinion. he offered her the role of Blanche. And it was 1948, and she had just gotten married. And we talked about it, and I said, didn't you regret it? And she had had her child, and I mean, if you know Streetcar, it's dark. And, talk about mental illness. I think Blanche and Mary Tyrone are the two great roles for women on the stage in America in the 20th century. And she just said, I couldn't put myself into that space. I couldn't give over to that space because, you've got a child, you've got a marriage, you've won a lawsuit, you've got an Oscar.
A lot.
Yeah, there was an awful lot, and it was not good timing. And I said, well, what about though with the film? And she said, I thought about it, but really it was not, I think it was not where she was wanting that career to go. I mean, Vivian did it, but look what happened to her.
And she couldn't have done the Heiress if she'd done Streetcar then.
No, well, no, that's the other thing too, to turn that down, to turn down one Broadway show for another Broadway show, basically. And the Heiress was much more in that direction, I think, that she saw that her career was going to go. And that career, I think, after My Cousin Rachel, is safe. I think it's safe, it's good, it's solid. But I think she chose that. I think that path is a safer path. And I said, didn't you regret it? She said, I thought about it, and no, I didn't. I couldn't. And she loved Vivian. She loved Vivian's performance. So, nothing, but I wish she'd done it. Oh, what a good stretch. It would have been great.
Did she ever talk about her relationship with Robert Osborne? That's from Danny Miller.
Yeah, yes. In fact, she gave me, and it was right before he died, before Osborne died. She gave me his assistant's email, finally. I never pushed on anything because I thought, I'm just lucky to be here. But he called her every Sunday. There's a really lovely article. Check out the New York Times archive with Robert Osborne. But yes, they were really close. He escorted her when she had to go. She was living in Paris, but when she had to fly to LA for an award, or, like for the AFI for Betty, and for Hitchcock, or like at the Oscars, the 88 Oscars, he was her guy. He was her gay best friend, I think, frankly. And so they talked for years. They met in the 70s and they stayed friends right until he died. And she missed him. I emailed her and I said, it must be hard for you. And she said, yes, but he wasn't well toward the end. But they were very, very good friends. And in fact, they were supposed to do a one-on-one. They were actually going to have a real conversation, because she did that thing, if you saw it, for the Errol Flynn documentary, and she did Melanie Remembers, but it was going to be the two of them. And then things just didn't come together. I talked to her agent about it, or, emailed, and it just didn't quite fall into place the way that they had hoped that it would. And isn't that a shame? Oh, that would have been wonderful. But it was a real friendship. They were truly, truly best friends.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria, for joining me today. This has been absolutely delightful.
I loved it, Carrie. Thank you so much. And it's been great talking with you this week, and we've gotten to know each other. And when things become safer, I'm really looking forward to coming out to LA or meeting in Savannah.
Yeah.
Because we have friends, you've got family, I've got lovely friends there, and I've got a guest room, and Minneapolis is fun. So anytime, you are more than welcome. Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Olivia. It was one of the great pleasures of my life to know her. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us for Hollywood Kitchen. Stay tuned for more fun food and film history in the weeks ahead. Thank you.